Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Premium. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh McDonald, Steve McGowan and Alison McConnell here with me in the studio. Delighted that you could join us. Thank you to so many of you for subscribing to PLZ Premium. And of course, let's not forget, if you subscribe to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel, you'll get the football show absolutely free. You get the Journos a little later on in the week. But with Premium, you get access to competitions, there's prize giveaways, and of course, lots of exclusive content as well. So thank you very much for joining us. And with a transfer window closed, I think all of us will get the opportunity to offer our opinion throughout the week on PLZ Soccer, who we think is going to win, who we think is going to be relegated, and how we view transfers within the clubs in the Scottish Premiership, whether they've been a success or a failure. I think that's going to dominate most of our thoughts, to be perfectly honest with you. So with that in mind, before we start talking about transfers, I thought we'd maybe pay tribute to the late Jimmy Bone, 75 years of age, Hugh, and forever remembered as a goal scorer in that famous win for Partick Thistle in the League Cup final of 71.
Yeah, and a varied career as well, a lot of clubs. I mean, some Mirren fans will remember from the old Anglo-Scottish Cup as well, where he was the one of the main players in that. Plus his coaching career, he influenced a lot of players and a lot of coaches. People that goes unnoticed to the general public, but in his role at the SFA and his collaborations with Alex Smith down the years, I've caused to remember Bannockburn Amateurs when he coached them as well. He was a great coach, Jimmy. He was a very good man as well. Great stories. Last night, one of the joys of last night was seeing a picture on Twitter of him with Ella Fitzgerald when he was playing in Toronto. Yeah. And he told a great story about him playing against Toronto. He was playing against Franz Beckenbauer and went in, shall we say, somewhat over-enthusiastically. And Beckenbauer was his football hero, and he says, I must have had slightly mixed feelings as after the tackle, Beckenbauer was shouting at me while he was being carried off the pitch. But yeah, I mean, well, that moment, that is one of the biggest moments in domestic Scottish football, that League Cup final.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing about it is he is of that generation. I actually looked back and I thought to myself, my God, I played it with him at Dukla, and he was such a good laugh. The dressing room was absolutely crazy. And when I was a youngster and lucky enough to get asked along to play with all these ex-pros, he, along with others, informed me that they, because they'd stopped playing and they still loved the dressing room, they were going to Brazil for a game. They'd arranged games in Brazil, and they would be on the beach. And I thought to myself, the football is totally and utterly irrelevant in this. They're going away for a jolly for 7 to 10 days. And then I thought to myself, Ali, how can you get away with that, But they would go, they'd organise these big trips regularly, with Chick Young, Tony Roper, Jerry, Jerry Collins, who recently passed away. But they were great lads, and the banter in the dressing room, and he was a really good player. Of course, Partick Thistle, let's not forget, actually, I can remember him playing for Celtic for a short period of time.
So John Robertson paying tribute to him this morning because he had a good spell at Hearts as well. So John Robertson said he was almost like a mentor to him.
Yeah, and of course when you have a front line, and a front line where you can easily call on Jimmy Bone, John Robertson and Sandy Clark. It's not a bad front three, is it?
Not bad, mate. Still take them just now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with all due respect, no disrespect to the Hearts' current front line, but if it was a choice between Lawrence Shanklin, James Wilson, Claudio Braga, I'd take Jimmy Bones, Sandy Clark and John Robertson every day of the week, and I'm not doing them a disservice, just better players. No. Is that fair? Has that been an old fuddy-duddy? You had a look at me there.
I like Claudio Braga.
So do I.
I think he's a good player.
Yeah, so do I.
Time will tell.
Yep, absolutely. But couldn't lace John Robertson's boots. And anybody who misses a chance from 4 yards out and hits the post, Stephen, have a long hard look at yourself. But I am a big Claudio Braga fan, I must admit. So Jimmy Bone sadly passed away. I know Ruffy will be reflecting on his old teammate, his friend, on PLZ Soccer throughout the week. As far as the transfer window is concerned, everybody always looks to see what kind of business Rangers and Celtic will do, and then other clubs as well. And I thought it was probably pertinent of us all to have a look and just see who's come out of it with the best deals. Who do you think's got the best deals so far out of this one, Hugh?
Best, probably. I think Aberdeen have had a good window. But then again, I think Aberdeen needed a good window.
Yeah.
I suppose there's signs of the Hearts revolution as well, maybe taking a bit of place. And St Mirren always get their business done early and quickly, under the radar. Yeah, I would probably say at the moment, if you look at what Aberdeen have brought in and needed to bring in, I think the fans at Pittodrie will be a little more enthused, but the problems are pretty deep there, and that's one we'll just got to have a wait and see, I think.
Yeah, the other thing about it, Stephen, is I didn't see Stuart Armstrong coming out of left field. That was a good one.
Don't think anyone did. I mean, I think the final hours of a transfer window is much a question of perception as anything else, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's how the window is perceived. Now, in time, it might prove to be no great shakes, but if you look at the perception, you look at Aberdeen bringing in Kevin Nisbet again, £300,000 permanent. You're looking at them bringing in Jesper Karlsson, who is from Bologna, Serie A, was once a £10 million signing. It's a 14 caps for Sweden, is it? That's the benefit of relationships. He had a good relationship with Jimmy Tillin. Aberdeen have a good relationship with Bologna from the sale of Lewis Ferguson, and then they cap it with Stuart Armstrong. So the perception is, if you look at the final hours of the window, that Aberdeen have really gone the extra mile because they recognised that the fans were unimpressed with what they'd done so far. I'm not saying it was just populist gestures, it wasn't. They've improved the team, but they recognised that they had to throw supporters a bone. I'm not sure everybody did.
Yeah, we'll get to the ones that decided not to throw any bones very, very shortly. But with that in mind, you're looking, you're saying to yourself, okay, what's the ambitions of the clubs out with the big two? Hibs, I think, have been very good in the transfer window. Probably, if anything, because there was a sniff of Lyndon Dykes and it didn't materialise. That probably maybe just put a little bit of a downer on some of the Hibs fans. But I look at the players that they've got and I'm thinking to myself, really, really good mix, a good blend, good backup strength on the bench as well.
And kept players too. I wondered if there might have been a late bid for Bowie, so they've managed to keep players. They've started the season fairly well, and I think now that I think they're in a fairly good position. I think they'll feel fairly comfortable about what lies ahead now. I think the Dykes one, I think he would have been a good addition for them. It was a kind of odd one. I think it fell down because of wages at the last sort of stage, but.
And by the way, I want 10 grand. I mean, surely that would have been done beforehand. That.
I mean, there've been talks for a long time. I mean, Aberdeen have been keen Dykes as well, but they've been talking to him, Hibs and Aberdeen, and he wanted to go to Edinburgh because his partner is from the Borders, I think.
Yeah.
So they're quite keen to move back to Edinburgh. I thought it was a fait accompli, 90% done, so I'm very surprised it fell down.
Yeah. But over the piece, I think when you look at the teams, well, Aberdeen have to, because they're at the bottom of the league, they need to do something. But the Hibs, the Hearts, Dundee United came in for a bit of criticism because they were signing a lot of foreign players, but you only have to look at some of their performances, I think, to say he's managed to gel them all pretty quickly. And I think Motherwell deserves some credit, Hugh, because not only have they got players who've actually embraced the manager's way of playing and very quickly and very impressively, they managed to nick Stephen Welsh in there to solidify the back line, which I think was a great signing for them.
I think it's a good signing for them as well. I mean, probably just that inch, 2 inches and half a yard to be real top class. But he's decent on the ball. He's combative. The only thing about Stephen Welsh is his injury record and that shoulder that keeps going. But yeah, it looks on it. But perception is the great thing about transfer windows. You know, there's always a great sign about the budget. You know, a budget that was praised when it comes out 6 months later looks dreadful. Liz Truss changed that thing, but anyway, so sometimes you look at a transfer window and it looks good at the time, and later on it looks not so good.
How often have you seen players who they were a £5 million signing when they came in, and then when they proved to be absolutely hopeless, well, we never paid £5 million, so that was always
it. The thing, because the last with the Celtic turmoil, there's been pictures re-emerging from Celtic FC about transfer windows past when they said, "How's this for a window?" and it was the Barkas, Ayeti, Laxalt, Shane Duffy, when you go, and yet at the time I was just going, "Oh, this looks pretty decent. This looks."
So I mean, it's perception, isn't it? But the reality can turn out pretty different.
Yeah, and with that in mind, Alison, we're going to talk about Celtic and Rangers. Celtic seem to gather the most news out of it because. Is it only Celtic that can come out of a transfer window where everybody generally thinks they're weaker?
I think they are weaker. I think if you look at who they've lost, the players that they've lost and what they've brought in, I think they are probably weaker. I think, is he signed 12?
10.
10. But you would have to say that the bulk of them have come in as projects, and that would be that would be the words of the manager, players that aren't first team ready. I think when you speak about perception, I think it's difficult to see this window as anything other than just an absolute catastrophe for Celtic. They've done so little. The perception would be that there is no strategy when it comes to approaching the window and structuring deals and looking at reinforcements that need to strengthen the team. You're arguing here that Kyogo left in January and the manager sat in a Fir Park press conference straight after the Motherwell game and said, "I have a replacement, like he can go because we know that there's someone else coming in," essentially. Didn't happen. And you get to the end of August, he's not been replaced. You look, Jota's out, long-term injury. I think it's inarguable that Celtic are weaker coming out of the window than they are than when they went into it.
And Iheanacho just screams of desperation when you get to a point where, I mean, I don't even think, let's be honest about it, the fans can stamp their feet all they want. Nothing's going to change. The board won't make any statement. They're just going to have to suck it up and take what the board throw at them, because Iheanacho, everybody's saying, "Oh, it's a last-minute desperation." I could trace that back 20 years. That happens every year. The Dolberg one, I don't think there's a catch chance in hell of getting him. I don't think they had any chance of getting him, because quite simply, the club and the money they were asking for him and what Celtic were pitching in as an opening offer was nowhere near it.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed constantly that same movie, that same storyline with various players down through the years. It's almost as if they try, right, let's throw this out there to just deflect away from the fact that we're not going to spend that money.
No, I think the bid for Dolberg was, I think the intention was there to sign him. I think you're right. I think they bid too low in the beginning. The opportunity was lost in day one, effectively, because by going in so low, you leave the door open for other clubs, and then you have this kind of chain reaction, because the transfer market is like a housing market. So Liam Delap gets injured for Chelsea, playing for Chelsea.
Yep.
Chelsea then are a striker down, so Chelsea go and they put a halt on Nicholas Jackson to Bayern Munich, was it? Yeah. They then recall the boys, Mark Gu, from Sunderland, they've loaned out to Sunderland. Sunderland are then a striker down, so Sunderland, what are we going to do? So they go to Ajax, and they sign, was it Brobbey, I can't remember, they signed, they filled the striker from Ajax, and Ajax have a vacancy. So what do Ajax do? They go to Dolberg, and they have the money, they have the intention. I don't think Dolberg was ever sold on Celtic, on Glasgow, more to the point.
Yeah.
But I'm led to believe Celtic had a private jet ready to go for him. You're always wary of using the words private jet because it just is redolent of the old David Murray Rangers era. But I think they were genuine about doing it. The big mistake they made, as happens so often, is they did not close the deal. They didn't get it done. And then they've basically given Adam Ida a move. They've told Brendan Rodgers, right, we'll get you a player to replace him. They haven't done it. And you're in of this absurd circus where you have the wealthiest club in the country parading around the day after the transfer window, trying to persuade free transfers and free agents, guys who barely scored a goal for 2 years, to move to Celtic.
Yeah. I have a private jet ready for Hugh and I to go to the next Boca Juniors match. But the jet's not got any fuel in it. It's got no intention of taking off. It's locked, but I'm telling Hugh, it's there, it's ready. And
yeah, it's pointless. Yeah. You could have the space shuttle if you're not going to actually agree to the terms and the fee.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, when you look at Kyogo, who wasn't replaced, then you've got Ida gone, and then you look and you say to yourself, well, the options are Maeda. If he gets injured, they're in trouble. Iheanacho hasn't scored a goal, as you said, of any great note, apart from, I think, 3 cup goals for Seville.
One for Middlesbrough, was it?
And one for Middlesbrough. And then, of course, you have a Johnny Kenny on the bench who's just signed a new deal, but, you know, his striking prowess is nothing that's going to get the Celtic fans excited. So you are in a situation where you're looking at the current champions, who I still think will win the league without anybody laying a glove on them. So maybe it's just domestic success, 77 million in the bank, and by the time the next figures come around, Hugh, I think they'll be touching close to 100 million.
Yeah. But I think the interesting thing's strategy there, you know, because if you look at it this morning, everybody I think will say Celtic are light at centre forward, particularly with an injury. And then you'll go, but wait a wee minute, they've signed, they've put one centre forward on an extended contract, and they've signed 3 other centre forwards since Christmas. They've signed Shin Yamada, they've signed Johnny Kenny, and they've signed Iheanacho. And then you go to yourself, but they'll not, you know, barring Iheanacho, they'll not play in the first team, or they're not first team picks. And you go, what is the strategy?
It's remarkable you can sign 10 players and not be sure that the first team is any better.
And this is interesting because, you know, when we said earlier at the beginning of the show, you know, when Alison said, oh, he's signed 10, and, you know, which everybody will say, oh, he signed 10, and you go, well, the strategy thing is Brendan Rodgers is you can run through a list, and we did it last week, of signings at Celtic, and it's like some kind of quiz game. Press the buzzer as you think who signed them, right? And I think most people would be almost 100%. Yamada, you know, Iheanacho, okay, probably Brendan did in a desperation. It's got, Brendan can have a look at your contacts book about it, that one. But by and large, you know, Inamura comes in. I mean, and is thrown under the bus by the manager, you know, immediately probably as part of some kind of internal rouse in that.
Yeah.
So what you've got is a strategy where Celtic are signing players that the manager doesn't want and not signing players that the manager does want. And that never ends well.
Well, what that effectively amounts to is you're undermining your own manager.
But he's not going to walk. I mean, in the last 24 hours, the rumours were absolutely at fever pitch.
6 different people last night sent me a WhatsApp saying Brendan Rodgers is quitting tomorrow and Kennedy and Maloney are taking over.
Yeah.
There's not a catch chance in hell, because quite simply, if Brendan Rodgers was to resign, regardless of what way you try and spin it, there isn't a corner of this globe where he would not suffer the wrath of Celtic fans for leaving in a second.
Well, I disagree with you there. Yeah, I disagree with you.
Well,
actually, I think I'm not saying he will or he should. He has to make up his own mind. But I think the time would be perfect for him to walk away now.
I think the optics
preserve,
are very, very
and preserve his legacy.
Only
because if he went and he didn't sign an NDA and he told, and listen, be a very brave man to take on Desmond in that fight.
Yeah.
But I think the time would be ideal for him to say, you know what, I could not work on those circumstances anymore, and the supporters would say, fair enough.
Anybody, the only difference between the last time and this, and I bow to your point on the fact that the circumstances are slightly in his favour. The only difference this time is the first time around he wanted out because of the various things that I had already mentioned that everybody knew at the time, and he had a club that he wanted to go to. But he wouldn't have any great difficulty in going to a club right away. But I don't think he'll walk away because, yes, there might be some people who look on him with a little less anger because of the circumstances that he's had to go through with it. But Brendan's gone early on this. Brendan's gone early in his condemnation and criticism long before the window shut. He started this whole, we have to read between the lines before they got to the Aberdeen in the cup final. He'd already gone into press conferences and started giving it subliminal messages that people could read into. So the unhappiness hasn't just materialised in this transfer window.
It started in Athens, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in Athens, for the press conference there when he said... where he said, I'm not getting back, there's blah, 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 blah.
The night before the Champions League call.
I mean, I texted Stephen Hang about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I said, do you think he would walk? Do you think he'd go? Because I could see it 4 or 5 weeks ago. I mean, it didn't take any great football seer to see what was in the line. I didn't think it would be as bad as this. I didn't think it would be.
He's not leaving by mutual consent.
No.
He's either going to get sacked because there is a genuine rift there.
He might get... I think he doesn't go on his own, and there's 3 million reasons for that, and they've all got a royal face on them, and a £1 sign. So I don't think he's going for that. The other reason is I don't think the fan thing will weigh on him this time round. I think there's a way. If you were a PR guy or his PR advisor, you would say there's a way out of this fan wise. There's not, you don't have to hide your face any time you fly into an airport. There's a way out of this fan-wise. I think there is a section of fans that would buy into him going. But I think money-wise, it's a big thing to walk away from money-wise. And there's also the thing that, that generally I think his family's very happy in Glasgow. That's not to say he stays.
No.
But that'd be... The other thing I think...
He's had his knuckles wrapped, Hugh.
I mean, with regards to this... If Brendan Rodgers is setting the public narrative, how can anyone be surprised? Because where is the counter-narrative? There isn't one. There is no communication. There is no accountability. There is no relationship with supporters in terms of being open and transparent about what your strategy is, about what your plans are, about why you behave the way you behave, about why you don't spend the money maybe you should spend. It is a one-way street. The only person who is speaking publicly from Celtic, I think over the course of 3 years, since the day he was unveiled and Michael Nicholson said we want to be world class in everything we do, the only person who's spoken publicly since then has been Brendan Rodgers. So is it any surprise that the narrative being set is entirely his?
Yeah, that's a huge problem. We spoke about that a huge weeks ago, a couple of weeks back, that
Who's
no one briefs.
Who's that a huge problem to?
I think it's a huge problem for Celtic as a club and also for supporters, because at least, one, there is no clear communication, or there is no subtle communication. In times gone by, you would possibly have people briefing. You would have people briefing journalists. So you would have a counter narrative, or you would have a balance to a narrative. When you don't have that, when you only have one, then you have the manager able to say his own agenda and his own narrative. But the bigger question now that I think come the end of the window, and you've had 6 weeks of it being very, very clear about the discrepancies between what the manager wanted and what he has got, is whether or not the relationship between the manager and the board is untenable. That's a bigger question now going forward. Can they continue to work together when quite clearly there is this huge disconnect and failure of trust now behind the
And the
scenes.
funny thing is that when he said it last Friday that there are good Celtic men who bleed Celtic, that annoyed supporters actually. Because it looked as if he was then rolling back and going back on side with the board. So
Which
it's a
he
very,
was.
Yeah, but it's a very
Also,
difficult place he's in.
there was a caveat to
Yeah.
you know, like, yeah, but still, I need these signings in earlier. But
Tre-
that all
treading at a tightrope, really.
That was an interesting. The timing of those comments were particularly interesting because what we now believe it comes after. You know, there's a request from the board to say, can you go and apologise for the comments that have been made on the back of the last few weeks. So the timing of them is interesting, but there was a doubling down. While the immediate perception is, oh, this is a board that bleeds for the club, there was still an undercurrent to it.
Well, I think what you have to remember as well, Alison, is that I don't presume to know how much money Brendan Rodgers has in the bank. I'm guessing he wouldn't be down to his last tenner if he left Celtic. That gives you a certain liberation, I would imagine. He doesn't need that job.
And there will also be other work.
I don't think he's walking.
I don't think he is either.
And I don't think he's going to get sacked
I don't think he will,
unless
but what
something happens in the next couple of weeks that is such a major fault line between them. Unless something rears its head to the point where there's a major fault line, he will be allowed to go on and ramble through it to get to the ultimate treble, to leave with his head held high. He's definitely leaving. What they'll do is they'll
He was also always leaving, regardless.
well,
There's
of course.
a perception that off they backed him. He was never. I don't think he was ever staying beyond the 3 years anyway. However, I do think the failure between the disconnect between him and the board, I think, is an interesting question now. But also, I think, were he to decide, I've had enough of this, I've had enough of the politics of it, that I'm going to go, I don't think there would be the same backlash, anywhere near the same backlash that there was the first time. I think I think the supporters would be this time on the side of the manager to say he had his hands tied behind his back, there was little more that he could do, he was working against a board. You know, we understand why he went.
Yeah, he'll not resign. If you're talking about a disconnect between the manager and the board or Dermot Desmond, I think there's a bigger disconnect growing between the fans and the board. But there's not going to be any change. There's not going to be anything out of it. They will not be able to in any way force a change of strategy, a change of thinking, a communication that is worthy between the two of them. I've heard lots of rumblings about Celtic trying to mobilise groups of supporters to show their objections, to stop, maybe buying the Europa League packages or cup packages or whatever. It will not make one blind bit of difference. And there'll be no communication otherwise to it. When you get to the board, then basically they'll announce this is what they've got in the bank and it will go on. They'll hear a few rumblings.
I was going to say, there's always going to be...
The world might stand up and say it's a disgrace, but they will not care.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got things in the background like the Celtic Trust looking for all these shares that were up in people's walls, framed, down various tunnels. But even I think if they mobilised and they got every single one of those shares, it would still not be... I mean, I think best bet, people are saying 20% or something like that. So even if they got every one of them, they're not, it still doesn't challenge Dermot Desmond's 34%. A lot of the stuff now is... I hesitate to characterise it as such, rudely, but it is just howling because it's shouting without any real substance behind it. The only substance behind it is anger, because if you say sack the board, we went through this last week.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we'll sack the board. How are we going to go about this? Yeah. No way. Right, boycott Celtic Park. Okay, X amount will boycott it, and all the people that's on the season ticket list thinks Christmas has come early, because they've been waiting on a list for years and years and years, and suddenly they're getting tickets. Boycott the Europa League is an interesting one, because I think that will happen almost in an unofficial way. I think a lot of people will decide not in a sort of huge protest way, just to give it a bye. Early kick-offs, it's the Europa League.
Maybe go
to the Roma game, such as that. I still think they'll shift a lot of tickets for it, but it certainly wouldn't be the Champions League.
I don't blame supporters, Hugh. I mean, I think what they feel is absolute impotence.
Well,
it's impotence, because you have a situation where you have a controlling shareholder who has 34% of the shares officially, but has 100% of his say. He behaves as if he owns the club when he doesn't, as if he is a majority shareholder when he's not. And he's such a wealthy, powerful man, no one can go up against him. No one can. If you look at 1994, it's a completely different scenario. The Kellys and the Whites, they were potless. They didn't have the money to withstand what was coming at them. All they had was a drawer full of IOUs. Now, you have a man who can withstand anything. If the fans boycott, if they don't turn up for Europa League games, well, so 70 or 80 million pounds in the bank. They've got insurance for a rainy day. And that's what they've always wanted to have. So boycotts will be utterly futile this time, and that's the problem. Supporters are impotent. There is very, very little they can do other than mobilise, get to that 10-20%, start calling EGMs, make life a little bit difficult, ask awkward questions. But does anyone really want to stand up and be the Fergus McCann against Dermot Desmond? No.
And with that, across the city, the suggestion is spent something like £35 million, and he has to turn it around, because prior to the Celtic debacle, everybody was speculating on whether Russell Martin actually lasts beyond the transfer window because of the poor displays and the unrest going on in the background with certain players as well. Some of them have been emptied, and you have to look at Rangers now and assess whether they are a better side, a stronger side, a side capable of avoiding, yet again another tsunami of unhappy supporters saying, get the manager out.
It's another perception one, isn't it? Another perception one that in the week where a Rangers manager went to Belgium and lost 6-1, he can be 6-0. Sorry, he can be said to have had a decent week, and that they're not quite arranging the tumbrel towards the gibbet this weekend. It's not because a matter of circumstances, because of what's happening at the other side of the city is taking heat off them. They bought a couple of players as well, which always, leaves paid £8 million for a striker, which always alleviates things, and escape defeat in the
worst Old Firm game of all time.
And there's over the decades that I've watched them, there's been a few contenders, but I think that one was absolutely certainly the least attractive one that I've seen. So he's got out of jail slightly, but the problems still remain for him. I mean, he's 6 points behind the league. He's got a couple of difficult games coming up when they return, albeit at home. But the home has not been the fortress anyway. He's already dropped. Well, they've dropped 4 points at home already in the season. 2 to Dundee and 2 to Celtic. So the problems remain for him, and the problems within the dressing room probably remains for him as well. I think the Raskin story has been kind of you could do a programme on that. I think it's been underreported because of the volume of other things, but that fallout seemed so catastrophic that the guy is training on his own, and suddenly transfer window's passed and he's still here.
You'll be looking for the two of them next home game to come out with Liam and Noel, won't you? Kind of arm in arm like that.
Yeah.
Murrayfield. But I mean, I think the interesting thing about how the transfer window ended for Rangers is I think some of the focus now has to switch from Russell Martin to Kevin Farewell, because some of the recruitment has been great, and they've just spent 8 million plus 2 million add-ons on a 21-year-old striker from Everton, who only started 2 games for Everton, didn't score. Made of after substitute appearances, but that's a lot of money to spend on what effectively would be deemed in most people's eyes as a project.
Yeah, but Kevin Thelwell will have known all about him.
Absolutely. So if this signing comes off, Thelwell will look like a really smart, good sporting director. If it doesn't, then I think maybe some of the monkey that's been on Russell Martin's back will probably shift to the guy who's hiding upstairs.
Yeah, Rangers can't get any worse than what it's been at the moment, you know, because I don't. If anything, is Hugh. It can when if he gets sacked. But as Hugh mentioned, to come out of it with any credit in the bank for a team that had no shots in goal against Celtic. I mean, they didn't get any better from the Bruges game. They're rank rotten.
It's a reprieve. It just buys a bit of time. It buys some breathing space across this international window. But as we spoke about on Monday, you're game by game. You're just treading a line. Just now, if Rangers were to lose to Hearts or to drop points to Hearts at Ibrox and then had to face Hibs in the Cup the following week, if there had to be anything other than a perfect approach to both of those games, all that noise comes back. It returns with a vengeance. This is a team that are in their worst start to a league campaign since, what was it, 1983? Getting a point against Celtic, to not lose to Celtic in Sunday's game does nothing more than just quieten a bit of the noise. And the fact that Celtic's window has been so poor has meant that so much of the focal point this week has been on the lack of activity and the problems that are at Celtic. Similarly, I think the fact that Rangers have had such a poor start in the league has actually taken a lot of the heat off Celtic just now too. I think had Rangers had a stronger start in the league campaign, I think the pressure on Celtic would be far more monumental than it has been at the minute. But I think for Russell Martin, it remains very much a work in progress.
But that's what's so preposterous about Celtic's window as well, isn't it? They have actively given other teams hope.
Aye.
There wasn't much hope before because Celtic were just the dominant force. Now you look at the way they played against Kairat Almaty over 2 games, you look at the toothlessness of their performance against Rangers and you think, hang on, they're not up to much. Now, new signings might make a difference, but looking at the pedigree, you couldn't be sure of it. So if you're Rangers right now, you're thinking, okay, we've got 2 or 3 new signings in the door, we'll get the guys bedded in, there's a chance to go again, just a little bit of hope. You know, it's a really poorly timed international break, I think, because there's a fascinating scenario in terms of domestic football just now.
This week would have been very intriguing. Had there not been the break, I think you would have had a box office press conference this week, and you would have had all eyes on Celtic Park, and that anger won't evaporate. It'll be there when Celtic go to Rugby Park in a couple of weekends' time. That Sunday game, you can expect that you will hear Celtic fans will make their feelings known, but the fact that you are able to just take a bit of breathing step from it takes a bit of the rawness away from it.
I think Hearts will give Rangers a harder game at Ibrox than Celtic did. Although their record against Rangers is generally terrible, but you know, you'd expect them to get more shots on target certainly than Celtic did.
The strange thing about it is all goes back to Almaty, because if Celtic had disposed of them and even played as poorly as they did at Ibrox, I would be saying it's fantastic. I think they've played well, and I know I'm alone in this. I think they've played pretty well in the SPFL. I think Hibs, St Mirren at the start of the season, it was only 1-0, but they hit the post 4 times. Maida was through in goal twice. They negotiated Livingston with little or no problems. Played Falkirk in the League Cup, no problems there. Went to Aberdeen, won cosily. And then people would say, all right, we played badly against Rangers at Ibrox, but hey, we came away with a point with Ibrox. If all that had been on the back of, and we're in the Champions League, everything the Gardens Rosy, I think the 2 games against Almaty were of such dispiriting and poor quality.
And even just the performance, not even just the fact that you can maybe go out to a freak goal or a freak result, but the performance across both
games was just absolutely abject.
Utterly.
I think your point, though, Stephen, is the fact that other clubs have been given hope. They won the league by 17 points last season at a canter, really. They lost 4 and drew 5 games. But I wonder how many people will look at them and think they can take a few more off them this season. Will there be a closing of the gap? All of us have agreed September 1st, after that, was a good chance for us all to assess and see where we are with regards to the league. I'm not so sure they're going to win it by 17 points this season. I do think they will win the league. And interestingly enough, I'm looking at the other clubs and seeing who possibly could give them a bloody nose, could give Rangers a few bloody noses along the way and maybe upset the apple cart. I've seen more than enough of every team. I think I've seen every team in the league, possibly apart from Kilmarnock in the flesh, and got a kind of a sense of them. And I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a shame for Hearts that this is happening so soon. Because above the kind of boos at Ibrox on Sunday, you almost hear Tony Bloom cackling in his Brighton bandolier. Because, I mean, I think Hearts will improve. I think they'll get better. But it's just a bit too soon for them.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, they're still sitting joint top of the league. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will have what it takes. I think they made some good signings. And Claudio Braga, the Greek winger who came on, made a real impact.
Hugh, the Brazilian.
Absolutely. I mean, Derek McKinnon says it looks like a Rolls Royce of a player. So, you know, I'm excited by what might happen there with the Jameson Analytics impetus. I just worry it's happening just a little bit too soon for him, because who can remember the last time Celtic and Rangers looked as vulnerable and as fragile as they do right now?
Yep.
Yeah, the only problem you have, Hugh, is because of that sustained period of, unrest with supporters of Celtic, the knife edge that the Rangers fans have with Russell Martin, who they're completely disenchanted with anyway. And then you get to a point where that's okay, because usually because of the strength of their revenue, they can ride these storms out because they know they're never really going to get any kind of challenge that's going to affect their dominance for 1, 2, 3 qualifiers to the Champions League. But right now I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, Celtic will win the league, even with their catastrophic transfer window and their board and an unhappy manager. But I'm thinking to myself, unless there's a dramatic change in Russell Martin, I think Tony Bloom's backing of them, the board's backing of Derek McInnes, I fancy them for a battle with Rangers for second.
It's interesting because you look at it and you look at the results and you see the table, of course, joint top. But if you talk to Hearts fans that have actually watched them this season, far from impressed.
Yeah.
Far from. And then you look at the results. I mean, it was Dundee United. I think they clawed back when Dundee United were just knacked. The last-minute goal and last-minute goals count as much as any other goal against Livingston. Seemed to struggle against Livingston, but I think Livingston will be decent this season. So it's not as if you've had a George Burley start where everybody's going, oh my goodness, this is, we're really going for it if you're a Hearts fan. So there's still questions over Hearts. I agree with Stephen that it's too early even to judge what Hearts will be, but I think it's certainly safe to say they're going to be stronger.
Yeah.
They're going to be much more potent. And then again, you go back to it though, there's a strategy there. It's so important. I hate to be so boring about it, but all the successful clubs in the world have one thing in common. They have a recruitment strategy. All of them. Because whether it's Liverpool, who have spent 400 million this year and deciding this is the time really to bulk up before possibly they have to cash in Salah at the end of the season. These are clubs that are thinking forward. They're saying, people say, why are they spending so much money? Because they know at the end of the season, Van Dijk's 1 year older. Salah might entertain a build for it. They're thinking about it in bigger terms.
Yeah.
You've got your Brightmans and Bournemouths and Brentfords who exist on thinking about it full time. They'll make mistakes, of course they will. I just think the biggest problem with clubs at the moment, I say this just generally, really about Celtic and Rangers, is that I can't quite discern a strategy. Where you can discern a strategy further down the league. I mean, Dundee United, you can discern a strategy there, what Jim Goodwin's wanting to do. He's wanting to go foreign because he thinks he gets more bang for his buck. And who's to blame him? Because he's the guy that signed Majowski for Aberdeen, and that did all right. So you can, generally down the league, you can see what people are going for.
I'll tell you where you discern the strategy Celtic and Rangers should be looking at. Club Brugge, who are a club who exists the last 2 summers. they have sold in the region of 70 to 100 million pound players, bringing in 3 or 4 young players in the 7 to 9 to 10 million pound bracket. They're getting it spot on the pitch and off the pitch. They're absolutely showing the kind of ambition and drive and strategy that is really, I mean, I know Celtic have had some praise for their player trading model. It's really not all that. Not compared to top clubs in Holland, not compared to top clubs in Portugal, not compared to top clubs in Belgium.
But the thing about Club Brugge is, of course, there's a huge caveat. They didn't win the league.
Yeah, and they do have they have the ability, and Ajax have that as well, Hugh. They do have the ability to not win it sometimes. So I take that point on board. However, they are constantly working to a strategy.
So, yeah, absolutely. But I always think, you know, when you hear the Copenhagen, the Bodo Glimp and all that, I always say, if you talk to your mates who are Celtic or Rangers fans and you say to them, would you rather have, you know, and we know they wouldn't, you know, to have a really great trade model and tens of millions in the bank, would you rather have a last 16 or even a semi-final of the Europa League, but you lose the league?
Yeah, but Tony Bloom's USG did win the league.
Aye.
They've got a strategy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It can work. But, I mean, you.
The other thing, Celtic did have a strategy.
That's what I'm saying. But it was bombed out. People didn't like it. And one of the people in the strategy is everybody told us, and he's a terrible player. He can't trap a bag of cement. He can't do this. He's a terrible player. Get rid and get a real centre forward. And this week, a Bundesliga club were willing to pay €28 million for him.
Yes, and the other aspect of it as well, you know, when you're looking at the ultimate club is Brighton. Sold £300 million worth of players in 3 years, albeit Casido was 100 million of that. They still shipped out players that they had invested a fraction of it and made huge gains from those players. But nevertheless, I've gone for, I'll stick my neck out and I'll say Celtic, Hearts, Rangers.
Hearts for second?
Yeah, there you are. And you know what you've just done there? You've just done, and you accuse me of it, right, regularly on this show. If somebody says something and I go, what, really? And you've just battered me there. I'm giving you Celtic, Hearts, Rangers, and I'm going to give you Falkirk to go down with Dundee in the playoff.
Oh, I've got for Dundee to go down.
Yeah,
Dundee are going down for me. I just
we're all at it.
I just don't see it.
Yeah, Dundee down.
I don't see it Dundee.
I think
Falkirk.
I think Falkirk will be okay.
Yeah, who's second bottom then?
Interesting. Quiz the league table.
there's one.
There's one you're facing right there, but the league table, basically.
That's a really, Falkirk might be in the playoff place, but that's really tricky because you've got teams like Motherwell, St Mirren, Kilmarnock throwing a spanner in the works by being better than people expected.
Yes.
So
Motherwell in particular.
Yeah. It's a pleasingly competitive league, sometimes for the wrong reasons.
Aberdeen bottom, no points. You know,
given the transfer window I've just had, I think they probably will turn it around a bit. I think you've got to remember as well, Peter, Aberdeen have had Celtic, Hearts.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for what happened losing at home with Falkirk, don't get me wrong, but they've had a tough start.
And they got a man sent off against Falkirk.
But I think as a figure, is the general figure for Aberdeen, is it 5 wins in the last 30 league games for Jimmy Tillene, is it?
Yep.
That's relegation form. That's a worry for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he, out with the circus that is Celtic and Rangers, I think that has taken the complete heat out of Jimmy Tillene and what he's done. Obviously, he bought himself a huge amount of time and kudos with the cup win. But other than that, it's been dismal. And the one thing I do think is in his favour is the signing of players that are forward-thinking, the Nisbet. You got to get goal scorers. You got to get people that can turn a 0-0 into a 1-0, and that's where he had that rich patch where suddenly they were scoring goals and the defence was keeping them out. So I do think they'll get away from it. But I look at it and I think to myself, I loved watching Falkirk last season. I thought they were a great side.
I did as well.
They were really good, but I don't see enough of a transfer window with players in that you think. they're going to, you know, and that's why I think
Bain was a really good buy for them.
Yeah. Who are you going for, Hugh? Because I've just nailed it, because we're obviously going to do an extensive feature.
I'm not telling you who I'm going for.
Yeah.
I've been contracted with Kerry Pollock later on exclusively to go through my 1 to 12, and I'm not throwing Kerry under a bus.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, I'll tell you, I'll go for relegating, I think, Dundee, because I thought, well, they've started the season poorly, which would a new manager and blah, 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 but their transfer window was zilch. It was like, and I think Falkirk for the other position, not that I'm against Falkirk, but I think they haven't got strength and depth. Largely a team, the Falkirk's amazing story, largely a team that's come from League One, where a few sprinklings apart from that. But I think the goalkeeper's a great, sort of decent signing for them. I think Brian Graham will do all right up front. I really like their midfield that they've got at the moment. I think Spencer's a good player in midfield for them. And I think the fullback he'll go into the right fullback. He'll go into better things.
Smart boy.
So I think they'll be all. I think 11th.
Isn't it amazing that when we've been sitting talking about this, no one's mentioned Livingston? And the reason I just think the reason for that is that you just look at Martindale's Livingston and you just think they are absolute street fighters, and they will find a way to stay up.
They're going to be my surprise package as well, because I think they'll do much better than expected.
They're mixing it up. It's not just...
It's the old image of the past. Is he said that himself. He's trying to play football now, which will be interesting.
And can I just say to you, having seen them a couple of times, they do play football. You know, and to his great credit, you know, he's more experienced, wily old fox. Got a few people in there that can mix it up as well, but got a few footballers.
Smith has been...
he's terrific,
he's been terrific for him. And he's only really played, he came on as a Hail Mary at Celtic Park, but he plays, you can almost tell the games that Martindale wants to play expansive, because he picked Smith.
Must just mention that obviously we've got Ali. I need you to give me yours.
I think Celtic will probably have enough to win the league. I don't think it will be as wide a chasm as last season, but I think Rangers will be second. I don't see
you Rangers
anyone
second as well.
I'm not having anyone splitting Celtic or Rangers.
Yeah, on the basis of what happened last year with Aberdeen, I think Rangers will eventually get enough about them, get their act together, be that under Russell Martin or be that under his replacement. I think they will do enough, to because, you know, they've just spent £25 million for crying out loud. It has to pay some dividend at some point. They have to be better than this. They can't continue to be so bad, albeit I concede the evidence at the moment of that is pretty scant.
I'm the same.
Yeah, okay. So, let's see where we go on that. Give us your thoughts on it as well. We'd love to hear from you on the Journos. Thank you to so many of you who download the podcast as well. I'm told we're something like 17th in the top 40 podcasts in the whole of the UK, which is not bad. It's the initial, it's the first song from the Dare album, and then you just work your way up to Don't You Want Me.
It's more Heaven 17 than Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet. I think you need to kind of...
It's a Penthouse and Pavement album, isn't it? And for the benefit of anybody under the age of 40, please ask your mum and dad to give you Penthouse and Pavement. It's a really good album, and it shows you can go on then to have even more hits.
And all you have to do is get rid of me as Tony Hadley, and it'll go to number one.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say to you, with all due respect, Peter Crouch spends millions. We don't. We're on a good trajectory going upwards, and of course on our YouTube. Yes, we're spending wisely. By the way,
the Club Bruges.
By the way, can I just say to you, my strategy has been really, really good. I look for the up and coming, really top university journalists,
and then just stick to the old stumbling out, standing outside post offices on a Tuesday, picking up pensioners in a white van.
With all due respect, you're my Frank Sosie. You're here, and I'm sticking by you. Over and above that, I've got to ask you just on that before we go. We're talking about players, and the big question on the back of Isak. And other players, the boy who signed for Newcastle as well.
Now the German,
who basically just threw the dummy out the pram and said, we're not going to play. Even the boy at Arsenal, he refused to come in for training one day because Gioikers, I think, because they want their move. Players too much power.
I saw Martin O'Neill saying that yesterday, actually. Yeah, if they stamp their feet, generally, they will get the move. Because there's no point, as we always say, the great cliche of holding on to an unhappy player. We saw that on a limited basis up here, of course, with Rangers. You know, Nico Raskan kind of caused a bit of a kerfuffle, and they sold a player for big money there, who apparently contracted an injury in the warm-up of the Old Firm game, and then didn't seem terribly keen.
Scored a double a couple of days later.
coming off the bench. So, yeah, players do have... I don't think you can say they have too much power, because for too long, things have been weighted far too heavily in terms of the clubs, really. And I think there's an interesting tussle now between FIFPro and FIFA, because FIFA now are being accused of putting the welfare of players at danger by having a 12-month calendar with the Club World Cup and so on. FIFA are saying, hang on a minute, they need more rest. There's an interesting test case with Diarra, is it? The transfer situation there, the way transfers are conducted. So there is a real tipping point at the moment, I think, where players are really, as a body, trying to assert themselves and stop allowing football to push them around, because if you and I decide that we have had enough of working for a certain employer, we can walk in, we can resign, we can leave. A footballer can't do that. And it's interesting how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, depending obviously on your own personal circumstances as well. Some players are in a difficult position at the other end of the scale.
Aye,
you know.
That is the brutality of modern football. And people now saying, like, I always remember, I'm old enough to remember Billy Bremner coming out and saying we're wage slaves.
Yeah.
Well paid wage slaves were wage slaves. Yeah. But that was when there was the retention of contracts. You just simply had to say there. So I'm old enough to remember that, which was, it was a term of, if not in slavery, then enforced tenure, shall we say. So that has tipped the other way. I think people get into a tizzy about players and players' wages, etc., when they're just an absolute, they're not worth that. Well, fine. Would you go to a hedge fund banker and say you're not worth $1 billion? I mean, it's capitalism. People are worth the value that the employers put on them. It's as simple as that.
You wonder how Dundee United would have survived.
They wouldn't.
From Jim McLean's era. And the only thing I would say, that I thought, United, with the players that they might have stayed a wee bit longer, was Maurice Malpass always remember saying to me, our basic wasn't great, but the rolling wins.
There was getting to a stage where
same wages as Celtic.
There was getting to a stage with the rolling wins, where if they won at St Mirren on the Wednesday, Dundee United almost went under because of the amount of money. But it happened across the place. I mean, one of the interesting things I always reflect back to is like, go back to the Lisbon Lions, for example. Everybody talks about Dundee United. Go back to the Lisbon Lions. All the Lisbon Lions played their best football at Celtic. That's an incredible stat.
Yeah.
A European Cup winning team, all playing their best. So not even one or two of them went in for and it's because they were retained. It's as simple as that. I mean, Tommy Gemmell, and I think it was probably his last interview with me, told a great story about how, because of the retention of contracts, that the club had to allow you to leave because the contracts were self-sustaining, that he wanted away from Celtic, and for 3 years, or 2 years, I think 2 seasons, he went in every second week and said to Jock Stein, has there been a bid for me? And he would just look up and say, no bids. And both these years he was voted best left back in the world by Football World magazine. So they're obviously, this was the level that he was just paid and retained. It's as simple as that.
Can I just say on that point, having spoken to his lovely partner Mary Gemmell, his wife, that well done to all the people of Craigneuk and a group and a committee who are at this moment very close to the figure that they need to get the sculpture in Craigneuk of Tommy Gemmell, which is just absolutely magnificent. It's a nice way to finish on a story of, when I think of the great managers and players around the whole of this country, the sculpture of Alex Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson up at Pittodrie, I think it's the same guy who's working on the Tommy Gemma sculpture, Alex something or other, if my memory serves me. But I know, having spoken to Mary, that she's absolutely delighted that the people who she says she meets who just talk so fondly of him. I knew him as a person, you know, closely, and he was a great lad to be around. But you know, in this day and age, Tommy could have forced his move and got 150 million, left back, scores goals.
Yeah, we talk about player trading models, and that very phrase tells that players are commodities, doesn't it? It doesn't make them sound like human beings. You know, just people who are traded so clubs can get the right bank balance and get their bottom line right. Players are entitled to say, hang on a minute, hang on a minute. We need a slice of that pie. You might think it's excessive, but they are entitled to fight for their rights, the same as every other body of men in any other industry.
You've got to remember Isaac as well. He's seen the football, not the sharpest of ends, but he was at Dortmund, didn't fancy him, traded him. So he knows, you know, be around players that have had cruciates, he'll be around players who didn't make it. He'd have mates that he's been in youth teams that are now serving behind bars or whatever. Yeah. So he'll be saying to himself, see, well, Stephen Smith's 150, 200 million flying about. Put a big chunk of that in my pocket, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one little footnote to that, and I know I've gone off at a tangent, but we're really finished. I looked on with sadness. There's obviously elements of it which I think footballers will have to take account, but Danny Murphy saying he's lost 4 to 5 million in this whole tax situation with the movies and everything like that. There's a lot of footballers who've worked their entire life and just for what they perceive as the wrong advice has left them.
I did a piece actually for Nutmeg just the other week. It was on life after football. And it was quite startling. You know, I spoke to Mark Riley, ex-Kilmarnock, Scottish Cup winner. You had him in here, of course.
Yes.
Ended up, you know, he stopped playing football, started working in a Subway store, and thought, what on earth's happening here? Yeah. You know, I spoke to Rory Loy, who had problems as well. He was working in the railways, and there was, you know, Lee Mayer, ex-St Mirren, who was selling photocopiers. Went from 75 to £100,000 to earning 18 grand selling photocopiers for a big commission aspect. And players struggle. I think it's a very neglected area, the struggle players have when they stop playing football, because going from there, and the adulation, the kind of fame, if you like, the money, the respect, the attention, and then suddenly they are part of the normal real world.
It's also getting being very well paid at a very young point in your working life, and then being ill-equipped.
It's hard to make people sympathise with millionaire footballers, Alison, but a lot of people miss it. Most of them are not millionaires, that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, that's a programme in itself, which I think we will address at some point with maybe some of those footballers giving us an insight into it. Great to have a chat and a bit of banter, and of course get your thoughts on who you think is going to be winning the league and who's going to be relegated. We'll all look back at it as we get closer to March and April with that look, that condescending look, as if to say, I told you so.
Affected it well over the last few
years. Absolutely. Good chat. Thanks to Stephen for coming in alongside the legendary Hugh, and of course the legendary Alison as well.
So I'm the only non-legend here, basically.
So you've got to just. To be fair, by
none taken. You're
my signing, and I'm trying to say, look, he's value for money. He's going to work. It's going to work out for us.
Strategy.
Just out of curiosity, shut up. You're the Hugh that's sitting there in 10 years. Because doom and gloom over there says to me, I'm 70 before we come on the show, and I thought you've got years to go.
Well, what a great future to look forward to being him.
That's right. Maybe so you can phone Ali and see if there may be some of my nappies left as well for you at that time.
I don't know why Stephen's moaning. What a great chance to just eat some soup and let it dribble all down your throat. That's the Christmas party for you with you. On that note, thank you for downloading the podcast. We really do appreciate it, and your support on PLZ Soccer. If you get a chance, hit the subscription to our premium service, and there's some great giveaways that we are sending out to lots of people who are becoming part of that football family as well. From myself, Peter Martin, thank you for listening, thank you for watching.